Did you know? Frozen is a remake of author Hans Christian Andersen's classic tale, The Snow Queen. Disney's desire to adapt the story to animation can be traced all the way back to the 1930s, even before Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs premiered. At the time, Disney planned to co-produce a feature-length biography about Hans Christian Andersen with Samuel Goldwyn's studio. The idea was that Disney would animate Andersen's stories, while Goldwyn would shoot live-action scenes of Andersen's life. Alongside The Snow Queen, Disney was interested in adapting Andersen's other stories. This included The Little Mermaid, The Ugly Duckling, and The Steadfast Tin Soldier, which were eventually adapted. However, Disney had issues with the character of the Snow Queen. She's extremely cruel in the tale, and Disney struggled to make her relatable. On top of this, the original story has an anticlimactic ending. The protagonist rescues her friend without a physical confrontation. No one knew how to fix these issues without severely deviating from Andersen's story. Production on The Snow Queen was halted around the start of World War II as Disney began to produce wartime propaganda instead. Goldwyn revisited the live-action Andersen film in 1952, but without any animated sequences, whereas Disney didn't dust off their project until the 90s. Although many well-known and talented creators took a stab at making The Snow Queen, including Tony Award winner Harvey Fierstein, nothing was satisfactory. Glenn Keane, who would go on to create Tangled, was heavily involved with adapting The Snow Queen in the early 2000s. He eventually left the project, unable to come up with a fun story that stuck to the source material. But things began looking up in 2008 when Pixar executive John Lasseter brought director Chris Buck onto the project. Buck's initial inspiration for The Snow Queen didn't come from Andersen's tale. It instead came from his desire to make a story with a different take on love, something that didn't involve the typical princess in despair trope that so many Disney films featured. Buck spent a few years coming up with the storyboards and rewriting the script. The commercial success of Tangled, alongside John Lasseter's guidance, finally got the project into full gear around 2012. At that point, Buck and producer Peter Del Vecchio still had Elsa as the main villain of the story. When they presented the project to Lasseter, he wasn't satisfied. Frozen's art director Michael Gilyadov spoke about the project's lingering issues. "I remember John saying the latest version of the Snow Queen story that Chris Buck and his team came up with was fun, very lighthearted, but the characters didn't resonate. They aren't multifaceted, which is why John felt audiences wouldn't really be able to connect with them." In this version of the story, Anna was a peasant who'd begged the Snow Queen, Elsa, to freeze her broken heart. Early sketches of Elsa showed her with short, spiky blue hair, light blue skin, and a coat made from living weasels. Co-director Jennifer Lee also mentioned how Elsa was planned to be the villain, but the story didn't go that way. Lee felt Elsa wasn't an evil person, that she just made bad choices in a difficult situation. This became obvious when the songwriters, husband and wife duo Robert Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez, were trying to come up with a villain song. They thought about how they'd feel if they were as isolated as Elsa, who had to repress her powers and get away from society. They abandoned the traditional villain song and instead wrote Let It Go in less than 2 days. When Lee, Buck, Lasseter, and the rest of the team heard the song, they finally knew who Elsa needed to be and began a heavy rewrite of the script. Elsa went from a villain to a more relatable individual who was just misunderstood. Around the same time, someone suggested making Anna and Elsa sisters. This new sibling approach, combined with the reworked Elsa, led to an entirely different movie. According to producer Del Vecchio, Disney does not see Frozen as a princess movie. They happen to be princesses, but we don't think about it that way, so I always get a bit thrown when people talk about this. We want to make them really believable and not set them up on a pedestal. Our version of these characters should feel real and be relatable to things you might go through in your life. Making things real applied to more than just the writing. For research, the Californian animators were sent to Wyoming to experience a wintry environment. They particularly needed to capture the feeling of walking through deep snow, and several animators, including the men, did just that while wearing a dress. The film's lighting team also traveled to Quebec. There, the team stayed in a hotel made of ice so they could study how light refracts and reflects in ice and snow. In a similar fashion, Frozen's visuals and overall aesthetic were inspired by visits to Norway. One example is the way Arendelle Castle is built in a fjord, while most other Disney castles rest on a precipice. Speaking of castles, the one Elsa created went through many revisions. Artists finally settled on a design they felt was natural and imitated the geometry of a snowflake. The sequence where Elsa builds the castle itself also took 9 whole months to develop. According to Jennifer Lee, the team spent considerable time trying to explain how Elsa got her powers. Lee said, "We had this whole explanation, like when Saturn is in alignment with such and such on the 1000th year a child would be born, and blah blah blah. And then, ultimately you almost throw it away with one line. So the line is just like, was she born with the powers or was she cursed? And she's born with it, and that's the last piece of it." The team ultimately found that trying to explain the powers just brought up more questions and made them have to define the rules of Elsa's magic. They decided these explanations were convoluted and limiting and got rid of them altogether. The voice of Princess Anna, Kristen Bell, originally auditioned to play Rapunzel in Disney's Tangled. After hearing Bell's voice, however, the casting director asked her to audition for Frozen. The voice of Elsa, Idina Menzel, also auditioned for the role of Rapunzel. A casting director secretly recorded Menzel's impressive performance on their phone and showed it to the Frozen team. Disney wanted to make sure Menzel and Bell had chemistry and asked the duo to sing together. Since none of the music had been composed yet, they sung The Wind Beneath My Wings. The song Do You Want to Build a Snowman was cut from the film multiple times, and whether it should be included was heavily debated among staff. It was almost left out for good, but was put back in at the last minute. The character Olaf may have been inspired by another Hans Christian Andersen tale called The Snowman. In the story, a snowman falls in love with a warm stove, but can't go near it because he would melt. This resembles Olaf's fantasies about hot summer weather. In an interview, Jennifer Lee confirmed the character Hans is partially inspired by the evil mirror from the original Snow Queen's story. This was shown with Hans's sociopathic tendencies. He'll reflect on a person's desires and adapt to get on someone's good side. Interestingly, Hans's character model was used to determine differences in height between humans and animals while making Zootopia. In the film itself, a pastry shop named after Hans can be seen in Little Rodentia. And this isn't the only Frozen reference in Zootopia. Two elephant girls can also be seen wearing outfits based on Elsa and Anna in Tundra Town. Did you also know that Zootopia started out as a spy movie set on a tropical island? Or that a media group working for Disney got the furry community to help promote the film? For more Zootopia facts, check out the Did You Know Movies video on Zootopia. If you're interested in the narrator of this video, me, then I recommend taking a look at my channel, the Pushing Up Roses channel. I reviewed a Barbie special. You know you want some of that.